Greetings and peace. I hope you and yours are having a wonderful month of April 2024. And today I would like to cover the book Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. For someone who grew up in the American school system and someone who came from the Pakistani American background, growing up in two different cultures and seeing education, culture, and upbringing in many different societies, countries, and cultures, I can attest to how useless the American school system is, and it does not prepare you to handle reality or life in any way, shape, or form. And John Taylor Gatto is an educator who shares the same sentiments as I do, being an educator in the field of teaching and how he spoke up against that. So before I start, this is for education, entertainment, and nonprofit purposes only. And I hope you benefit from this book review and analysis and teaching of what John was trying to teach us. So before I get into the book, I'll talk a little bit about him for those that do not know this great man. And I dedicate this to his memory since he passed away in 2018. Now, John Taylor Gatto was an American educator, author, and advocate of alternative education. He's known for his criticism of traditional schooling and his promotion of homeschooling and unschooling. Gatto's works, such as Dumbing Us Down, the book that I'm covering now, and Weapon of Mass Instruction, challenged the conventional education system and argued for more individualized and self-directed learning approaches. He passed away in 2018. John Taylor Gatto was born on December 15, 1935, in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, and grew up in a working-class family. He initially pursued a career in teaching, spending almost 30 years as a public school teacher in New York City. However, he became disillusioned with the traditional education system and its emphasis on conformity and standardized testing. Gatto gained recognition for his criticisms of the education system, which he outlined in his books and speeches. He advocated for homeschooling and unschooling as alternatives to traditional schooling, believing in the importance of self-directed learning and individualized education. Throughout his life, Gatto wrote several influential books, including Dumbing Us Down, the book that I'm going to cover now, and also The Weapon of Mass Instruction. Gatto's ideas sparkled discussions and debates about education reform and the role of schools in society. He passed away on October 25, 2018, leaving behind a legacy of challenging the status quo and advocating for alternative approaches to education. John Taylor Gatto's teachings revolve around his critiques of the traditional education system and his advocacy for its alternative approaches to learning. Now, some key points of his teachings are as follows. 1. Critique of traditional schooling. Gatto argued that the traditional education system stifles creativity, critical thinking, and individuality. He believed that schools prioritize conformity and obedience over genuine learning and personal development. 2. Hidden curriculum. Gatto popularized the concept of the hidden curriculum, which refers to the non-academic lessons taught in schools, such as obedience to authority, conformity, and consumerism. He believed that this hidden curriculum was detrimental to students' intellectual and emotional growth. 3. Homeschooling and unschooling. Gatto advocated for homeschooling and unschooling as alternatives to traditional schooling. He believed that allowing children to pursue their interests and learn at their own pace outside of the institutionalized setting could lead to more meaningful and effective learning experiences. 4. Self-directed learning. Gatto emphasized the importance of self-directed learning, where individuals take control of their education and pursue topics that interest them. He believed that this approach fosters curiosity, independence, and a lifelong love of learning. 5. Community and mentorship. Gatto promoted the idea of learning within communities and through mentorship relationships. He believed that real-world experiences and interactions with knowledgeable mentors are essential for holistic education. And Gatto's teachings challenge traditional notions of schooling and advocate for a more personalized, student-centered approach to learning that prioritizes individuality, critical thinking, and genuine intellectual curiosity. Now, the American school system we have today is like a one size fits all, which is not realistic. This is what Gatto is challenging. Now, moving on to his book, Dumbing Us Down: The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling, is a book by John Taylor Gatto that critiques the traditional education system in the United States. In the book, Gatto argues that the modern schooling system is designed to suppress individuality, creativity, and critical thinking in students. He outlines 7 lessons or functions of schooling that contribute to the suppression. 1. Confusion. Gatto suggests that schools create confusion by presenting fragmented information without context, leading students to rely on authority figures for guidance. 2. Class position. Schools reinforce the idea of class hierarchy by grouping students according to age and ability, thereby limiting interaction between different social groups. 3. Indifference. Gatto argues that schools promote indifference by discouraging students from forming meaningful connections with their peers and teachers. 4. Emotional dependency. He contends that schools foster emotional dependency by encouraging students to seek validation and approval from authority figures rather than developing self-reliance. 5. Intellectual dependency. Gatto suggests that schools discourage independent thought and problem solving by prioritizing rote memorization and standardized testing over critical thinking skills. 6. Provisional self-esteem. Schools offer temporary rewards and praise that artificially boost students' self-esteem, but these are contingent on conforming to authority rather than genuine personal growth. 7. One can't hide. Gatto argues that schools teach students to be constantly monitored and evaluated, leading to a culture of surveillance and conformity. Throughout this book, Gatto advocates for alternative forms of education, such as homeschooling and unschooling, that prioritizes individualized learning, critical thinking, and genuine personal development. Dumbing Us Down challenges readers to rethink the purpose and effectiveness of traditional schooling and consider alternative approaches to education. John Gatto discusses the importance of unconventional teaching methods, emphasizing that learning should be continuous and purposeful. He criticizes traditional schools and advocates for education that nurtures the soul. Gatto's early work on Ken Kesey's novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, is praised for its insightful critique of institutional conditioning. Gatto's radical ideas call for a re-evaluation of the education system to promote creativity, meaningful work, and community contribution. Gatto reveals that schools are successful in creating a docile workforce for corporate capitalism. And if you look up the lecture by President Woodrow Wilson, he did make a lecture in front of an elite class where he said we would create one class of people to be workers and we would create the other class of people to be the rulers over them, where they would both get the same education, but it's like this, just the juxtapositions of society, right? Where they tell you, oh, be nice to everyone, but beat out the competition as well. So that's what it comes down to. There is a different set of class that is there. I remember myself being a Pakistani American, and in high school, the people who would have a higher socioeconomic background, they would have separate teachers, classes, and they would never be allowed to be mixed in with the other kids who would come from a lower socioeconomic background. I've seen this with my own eyes. Gatto reveals that schools are successful in creating a docile workforce, and he is absolutely right about that. The system ensures dependency on corporate institutions. The constant narrative of school failures fuels the demand for resources and services, creating a cycle of need. Gatto's background in advertising sheds light on the manipulation behind education reform efforts. The book discusses the flaws in the education system and the need for reforms to provide a more suitable education for children in the 21st century. It emphasizes the importance of self-motivation, communication skills, technology, and individual variation in learning. The author, Mr. John Gatto, criticizes the current education system for prioritizing social machinery over human spirit, creating a need for dumb adults. The book highlights the potential for change through alternative education methods, such as homeschooling and community based learning, and it advocates for protecting and expanding zones of freedom in education to promote creativity and imagination. In this book, Mr. Gatto, he challenges conventional assumptions about education and social order. Sharing his experience as a teacher, he emphasizes the importance of providing quality options for disadvantaged students and fostering critical thinking. His vision may seem bleak, but he believes in the power of free-thinking individuals to correct social ills. Gatto's unconventional teaching methods focus on removing obstacles to children's inherent genius rather than imposing knowledge. This approach challenges the traditional education system and could potentially threaten its existence. Trust is a vital component of Gatto's teaching practice. He believes that government schools are unreformable and mainly teach a hidden curriculum that reinforces myths and caste-based beliefs. They focus on confusion, class position, and indifference, teaching students to accept confusion, stay in their assigned class, and be indifferent. Mr. Gatto suggests that true education involves challenging assumptions and allowing students to make their own mistakes and find meaning in learning. It reminds me of the Socratic method, people who use the Socratic method in homeschooling. They are the ones who are kind of taking away this control and homeschooling their own children to teach them better ways of critical thinking. Teachers encourage students' enthusiasm in lessons, but quickly move on to the next task, teaching them to turn on and off like a switch. They instill emotion and intellectual dependency, promoting conformity and discouraging individuality. Students are constantly evaluated by authority figures, leading to a reliance on external validation. Surveillance in schools eliminates privacy, instilling a sense of constant observation and mistrust. These lessons shape students into obedient individuals who rely on experts for direction, perpetuating a cycle of dependence in society. Children must be closely watched to maintain central control in society, achieved through compulsory government monopoly mass schooling. Originality and freedom were once valued in the United States, but a centralized society now requires compulsory education. The 7 lessons taught in schools promote conformity and subordination to maintain control. However, it is possible to overthrow this system and create alternative ways to educate young people based on true meaning found in families, friends, and nature. The development of modern schooling was influenced by fears of revolution among the poor, cultural differences, and racism. These lessons in school are designed to create a permanent underclass, but there is a potential to change this system and prioritize meaningful aspects of life. The growth of the school bureaucracy, or the bureaucracy of the schools and industries profiting from schooling, has led to schools now seizing the middle-class children. Socrates, as I mentioned before, predicted the professionalization of teaching would lead to the loss of teaching foundation. And I like the fact that those that are homeschooling their kids are using the Socratic method to help better prepare their kids. Schools are causing a national crisis with students indifferent and distracted. The hidden curriculum of schooling prevents effective personality development. Institutional schooling is destructive and anti-educational, serving as a jobs project and business. Now, besides those that are doing the Socratic method, I'm really proud of my community as well, the Islamic community, who have kind of made their own accredited Islamic schools and are kind of doing their own thing to teach their kids and preparing their kids to handle the world, rather than this confusion in American schools that one goes out in the 12th grade where they don't know how to apply for a job, they don't know how to do taxes, they don't know how to write a check. Just basic day-to-day life tasks. There's this mass confusion that they go out with. They just don't know what to do. So those that are doing the homeschooling, like Western families that do the Socratic method or their own personal homeschool method, or my Islamic community in Western countries who have their own Islamic institutions. I think that's a step in the right direction. A free market system in schooling is needed. Schools inhibit important life lessons and are becoming increasingly irrelevant to society's needs. Schools have no conscience and are psychopathic in nature. Massachusetts population resisted compulsory education with guns. Literacy rates dropped after implementation. Homeschooling movement growing with more educated children. Schools focus on managing population, not educating, shaping irrelevant individuals. Schools and TV shape dependent and aimless personalities. Children have few real-life experiences, lack curiosity and compassion, live in the present. They struggle with intimacy and honesty. Intimate relationships are discouraged due to emotional barriers caused by materialism and dependency in children, influenced by schooling and television. School reform must address these pathologies. A national debate on education reform is needed, focusing on self-knowledge and independent study. Community service should be a required part of schooling to promote responsibility and unselfishness. Families should be the main engine of education, with schools promoting parent-child confluences to strengthen family bonds. This approach can lead to a real reform in schooling. Mr. Gatto discusses the need for new voices and ideas in education and highlights his own experiences growing up in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, by the river, where he learned valuable lessons from the community. Despite a successful career in advertising, Mr. Gatto chose to become a teacher instead, citing the lack of importance and narrow focus on his previous work. This decision was met with skepticism from colleagues who viewed teaching as a welfare project for losers. Mr. Gatto describes his own experience as a junior high school substitute teacher in New York City. Despite facing challenging working conditions and a dangerous situation on his first day, he is inspired to continue teaching after a young student, Milagros, proves her reading abilities and is moved to a higher class due to his intervention. This interaction with Milagros ultimately solidifies Mr. Gatto's dedication to teaching, as evidenced by a note of appreciation from the student. Further, Mr. Gatto discusses the importance of communities over networks, with a focus on the negative aspects of networks draining vitality from families. He argues that increasing formal schooling, advocating for less schooling, and more community involvement. And further, the book highlights the artificial nature of networks and the loss of true human connection in network settings. He emphasizes the need for real communities and the detrimental effects of excessive networking. It's like what we have now, right? It's not about your degree, but about who you know. There is nothing meaningful behind that. Network schools dehumanize students, teachers, and parents by replacing community vitality with a soulless mechanism. Communities with their human variety and emotional richness offer a higher quality of life. Networks focused on efficiency fail to nourish members emotionally, leaving people lonely. Institutions prioritizing control over service demand loyalty above all else. Mass schooling further alienates individuals from their human nature, emphasizing meaningless achievements over genuine connections. An alternative approach is needed, one that values community and human relationships over institutional demands. The United States, the good old USA, has shifted from communities to institutions in cities, resulting in a disconnection between generations. The prevalence of institutions and networks cause alienation and indifference in society. These institutions prioritize their own survival and growth over their intended missions. The focus on economic successes in education conflicts with traditional community values, leading to societal issues. The purpose of mass schooling should be re-evaluated to prioritize meaningful connections and relationships over material successes. Education is about discovering meaning and purpose for oneself in a community, not by being locked away from the world. Communities have natural limits and foster importance through attention, unlike institutions that continually expand. The culture of schools contradicts what drives people to excel and involves competition for subjective favor. Truth is valued in communities, but lies are common in institutions like schools. The Cathedral of Reims exemplifies uncoerced human union, contrasting communities with the artificial integration of networks like schools. Rather than expanding compulsory schooling, efforts should focus on creating emotionally rewarding communities. Schools already weaken families and communities by separating them, suggesting a need for less schooling, not more. Mass schooling in the United States is criticized for its failure to nurture individuality and community values, instead, promoting conformity and state control. The idea of compulsory schooling as a means of social engineering is denounced, as it hinders the development of personal freedom and creativity. The book emphasizes the importance of family, privacy, and self awareness in education, arguing for less institutional schooling and more personalized learning opportunities. It calls for a fundamental shift in the current education system towards a more flexible and individualized approach, rooted in democratic principles and free market competition. Colonial New England had a unique system of local governance known as the congregational principle, where each church congregation took responsibility for decision making. This system promoted individuality and dissonance, leading to progress and quality of life. Towns had the power to exclude individuals, creating selective communities, which looks like it helped them. This system fostered self-reliance, democracy, and local loyalty, contrasting with government monopoly schools that enforced uniformity and conformity. The congregational principle led to prosperity and a strong community in colonial Massachusetts. Compulsory schools should focus on local knowledge and love rather than global ideals. The negative side of local choice, like religious discrimination in colonial Dedham, is evident, but it can lead to reform without central intervention. The experience of centrally planned systems like national curricula in schools has not been successful and has even worsened social issues. Intimidation and compulsion may not produce desired results and can diminish human values when used excessively. The book discusses the impact of government monopoly schooling on the quality of human life, highlighting the negative effects of prohibiting local choice and variety in education. The book emphasizes the importance of the congregational principle, which promotes voluntary gatherings and harmony for maximum potential. Mr. Gatto criticizes the centralized and uniform approach to education, comparing it to treating people as machines, and advocating for a more individualized, community-based approach. Ultimately, he argues against the current education system and calls for a more holistic and flexible approach to education for the well-being of individuals and society as a whole. Our education system is failing, leading to corruption, decay, and societal collapse. Monopoly schooling, based on the lie that there is only one right way, must end. Decentralized community-based education is the solution. Trust families, individuals, and neighborhoods to define education and abolish certified teaching to restore democracy in a free market model. Reconnect with the congregational principle for a truly American solution to the education crisis. And Mr. Gatto's personal experiences and letters show the impact of challenging the institutionalized education system in his book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum. I hope you were all able to benefit from this summary teaching from Mr. Gatto's book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. And as someone who's went through the American education system, I can say that it's completely useless. The teachers are not respected. The concept of how the students are today is out of control with the bullying and fighting, and a system that's not there to instill any education or discipline or prepare them for their adult lives. It's none of that. It's just forcing people to be there and grouping everyone together in one class, while the elite class, or those that are of a higher socioeconomic background, they keep them separate, just like Woodrow Wilson's lecture from 1916, that we would create one class of people to be the rulers, giving them the same education, and then we would create a second class of workers, given the same education, to be obedient workers. So the ones that are just put in that school to prison pipeline or to the school to work pipeline, they just give them the basic education. They don't give them the opportunities, such as minorities or low income individuals, which includes low income whites as well. And they just throw them in that system where they have no choice but to either join the military, work immediately after school, or go to community college. Well, there's another set of people that they prepare for higher institutions and higher positions of power. So that is the reality here. And I'm happy that some communities are not taking control back in their own hands, such as what we see with the Islamic community. They got their own accredited Islamic schools throughout America, where Muslim families are chipping in together and creating their own institutions, because even if their kids are being bullied in schools, even though they report it, the administrators and the teachers don't do nothing about it. And if you defend yourself, then you get in trouble. So they're just taking their kids out of that system in general and creating their own accredited institutions. Other people are doing the Socratic method of homeschooling. Kudos to them too. And other people are doing their own alternative methods. So I've seen a different variety of approaches in the homeschooling system, and I'm happy for those that are taking that approach and getting away from the government compulsory schooling, which is not there to design to benefit anyone but their own selves. So thank you so much. I hope you were able to benefit from this. And again, this is just for education and entertainment purposes. And I hope you enjoyed what Mr. Gatto shared in his book. And I encourage you to get this book from Amazon and read it and study it so you can get a better understanding. Peace and blessings.